how to make an interesting character. The books that are always the most interesting to me are the ones with characters in them that I wouldn't mind hanging out with, or who are just really well thought out people. The thing you always have to remember is your character is a person. And this is the truth even if your character is technically not human. Hell, you could have a synthetic AI intelligence. You can grapple with what makes somebody a person in a situation like that. But you have to grapple with it. It can't be assumed. And you have to make sure that your person is a person. Now, we live in the age of the internet with a million YouTube videos about how to make characters interesting. You have to have a flaw. A big one. And it can't be something stupid like, she's just too pretty, or she's just too nice, or God, those are boring characters. And if your character has a trait like that, you may be drifting into Mary Sue territory. Because when I very first, before I went to college, before I started the fate of Cornell, back before I had any literary training at all, I started trying to write a novel. A heroic fantasy novel. It had kind of a nifty idea. It was kind of an isekai, a term that didn't exist at the time, where, young lad from our world gets sucked up into this other dimension and is going through this training and, is getting powers so that he can go off and go on adventures. It was kind of a nifty idea, but the character had way too much power. Way too much power. And I got to one of these points in the book where I got about 12 chapters in, and the only thing I could do was give the character amnesia, which took away a lot of the powers that he had figured out. And I was like, and I remember thinking about it going, this is so stupid. and once he got amnesia, it's like I was writing a different story, because I was, the first story was an interesting idea. It taught me bits about how to form sentences and how to make things and how to, make characters. But for the most part, it was kind of a mess. And I fell right into the Mary Sue thing. And a Mary Sue can be male or female. I know there's a big thing about, social justice warriors make only Mary Sues going around the internet, but it's like, okay, most of us who are amateur storytellers tend to make Mary Sues on our first outing. And it's just what we do. Dungeons & Dragons is a fantastic example of everybody wants to make some Mary Sue type character who doesn't have any flaws. And the only reason they have flaws is because they're starting the game at level 1. Which, hey, that's a flaw. You're level 1. You don't know your weapon very well yet. The big scary monster is going to smush you if you go out there and get into its face, and so you have self-imposed limits of, I think that thing would kick the snot out of me. We should probably not go fight it yet. Well, the Mary Sue character, would just go in and be like, I'm Batman. And he would take it on anyway and win anyway. And that's the problem with Mary Sue characters. They don't really have anything, they don't have any space to grow. And character growth tends to be where a lot of the interest lies in stories. There's a reason why the hero's journey has been so revered for thousands of years, and why Joseph Campbell and his Hero of a Thousand Faces did a really good pointing out of that. Now, if you decide to read Joseph Campbell's A Hero of a Thousand Faces, then may the force be with you. Because as an English major, I poured through that book and I could barely understand it. Because Joseph Campbell had this way of writing that was just really, really difficult to penetrate. He loved his massive vocabulary words. He liked to wander through and just, oh God, it was so difficult to read his stuff. So if you manage to do that, party on with your bad self. You're a better person than I. But there's a lot of people who have read it and understood it that have made some marvelous deconstruction videos on, oh, here's what he's talking about. And it's like, oh, okay. And if you look at the hero's journey and how it's structured, that is a very good analysis of what is going on in that situation. So you've got to make it so your character is flawed. You know, maybe your character is a jerk and has to learn to not be a jerk. Maybe your character doesn't know how to fight well and has to learn how to fight well. Maybe your character doesn't know how to use the Force yet and has to learn through a whole bunch of adventures. Maybe you need to make it so that, your character has an interesting flaw to overcome. Because this may surprise a lot of people, but flaws are what make us as humans interesting. And that's just on a day-to-day basis. Every single one of us has flaws. And, if you've got friends, which I hope you do, look around at them and ask yourself, what makes this person interesting? I have a good friend who's, got a great nickname, and basically he is a mountain of flaws. He's kind of a party animal. He's got this very intense personality, and he's really off the top. And just, he kind of, it's like having a barking dog at the table. He's a lot of fun. He's also completely out of his mind and has a bad habit of getting into trouble in ways that could have been avoided. And, it's like, dude, you're hilarious, you're fun to have around, but you're a lot. Well, that's kind of the thing. That would make he would be a great character in a book, because he's kind of a lot. I have another character who is, he's a giant a-hole and proud of it, and will be the one to tell you about it. He'll look at a person and be like, as a threat, oh, do you want to have a who's a bigger jerk contest? And all of us will lean away from him and be like, no, dude, you win that one. That's totally a thing that you can do. So, it's, you're not going, that's an interesting character. He's a huge jerk, but he's got a big heart, and he likes to help people, and he's usually right when he gives you some kind of observation about yourself, he's usually correct. And so, at this point, the fact that he's also a huge cantankerous jerk, to me, it's always been kind of comical. It's like he's so over the top that you're just like, dude, what the heck? As a result of that, I've found myself, hanging out with really rough people because they're interesting. They're a little prickly, and they're a little spiky, and they're a little this and a little bit of that, and there's always that underlying threat that you might get a, slap up the side of the head, but you won't be bored. And by the way, in books, stories, movies, do not make a boring character. Because the number one thing that you as a writer, as an artist, is trying to do is entertain an audience. If you're not entertaining, you have failed as a writer. If you're not entertaining, you have failed as a storyteller. So don't make boring characters. Make interesting characters. And yes, that does require more work. But, all the good things in life require more work. So, get to work. Speaking of getting to work, I'll see you all later.